On this Wednesday night, Newfoundland and Labrador's frustrated and furious fish harvesters. The heated protests and the demands. The immigration minister makes a frank admission about his government's Gaza asylum program.
Up to now, it is a failure.
What's failed and who it hurts the most. Vancouver's Stanley Park is losing about a third of its trees.
I don't see a better option.
Why so many trees in the historic park are dead or dying. And gauging the world's happiness. Which countries are smiling the most? And where does Canada rank?
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The business of government came to a standstill in Newfoundland and Labrador today. Hundreds of protesters blocked entrances to the Confederation Building, refusing to let staff and politicians in on what was supposed to be Budget Day. Police, including some on horseback, were sent to try to control the crowds, but the chaotic scene, which began before sunrise, was so disruptive the budget has been delayed. Hundreds of fish harvesters, most of whom make their living catching crab, are demanding the province give them more control over where they can sell their catch and what they can sell it for. Heidi Petracek on the long-standing complaint that's boiled over in St. John's.
What was supposed to be Newfoundland and Labrador's Budget Day instead became chaos. With shoving and shouting, police on horseback pushing into the crowd of hundreds outside the Confederation Building entrance. An officer and a protester.
Oh, is there people getting hurt here?
Injured and taken to hospital.
It looks like his hip is broken. His family's with him.
And so Budget Day was postponed, the provincial government calling it, quote, an unsafe environment.
What is unacceptable is violent protests. And so some of the behaviors we saw today will not be tolerated.
Fish harvesters say overregulation and selling restrictions keep them from making a living in a fishery not as lucrative as it once was before the cod fishery collapsed 3 decades ago. Snow crab is now the most valuable catch, employing more than 17,000 people and worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But prices this year, they say, are set far too low.
Last year we went to work for nothing, and now they're trying to do it again this year, get us back to work again for nothing again. And we're not doing it this time.
I shouldn't have to be in here fighting for my very right to survive in an industry that I've grown up into.
Their union has urged the province to grant new processing licenses and open up all fish markets to outside buyers. But so far, Newfoundland and Labrador has only committed to do so for snow crab.
I want to stress we want to do it responsibly because the whole of the industry doesn't just include a select few.
The province now has a temporary injunction to keep protesters from causing a nuisance adjacent to or in the vicinity of the Confederation Building and from molesting, assaulting, or intimidating the province's employees or blocking the entrances to the Confederation Building.
Get used to us. That's all I got to say.
Protesters plan to return Thursday when the province intends to try to release its budget again. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Israel, which had said it had control of northern Gaza, is launching more attacks there, including one on Shifa Hospital. The IDF claims it's killed at least 90 gunmen during a 3-day raid on that hospital, a claim Hamas denies. Shifa was the biggest hospital in Gaza before the war. Now it's one of the few healthcare facilities even functioning in northern Gaza. Hundreds of displaced people are living there. Israel claims gunmen were again using the hospital and that it found a stash of weapons and detained 160 people. The Hamas-run health ministry says all of those killed were wounded patients and displaced people. Canada had opened a temporary visa program so Canadians with family in Gaza could apply to get them out. Well, today the immigration minister made a frank admission about that program. Marc Miller said it's a failure. We have heard from a number of Canadians who complained the process has stalled. And now a parliamentary vote on a motion calling on the governing Liberals to halt future arms exports to Israel could make things even worse. David Akin is following developments. David.
Well, Donna, MPs who voted in favor of Monday night's motion were most pleased about a call for Canada to cease all exports of arms to Israel. And Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly said she would follow through on that.
Ms. McPherson.
But that motion and Joly's response angered the government of Israel. And Canada's Immigration Minister Marc Miller said Wednesday that will impact a special immigration program to get people out of Gaza.
The actions of the government of Canada has consequences, and on the particular impact of that program, I don't think that motion is necessarily a good thing.
In January, Canada set up a special temporary visa program to help up to 1,000 Canadians and their extended family members trapped in Gaza. So far, 986 have applied, and yet the program has helped just 14 people get to Canada.
This is a program that we knew from the get-go could be a failure. Up to now, it is a failure, and it's something I think we need to recognize.
An Ontario woman said this week that her brother died in Gaza while waiting to hear about a visa from Canada. And Global News reported Tuesday about a Calgary man who has 16 extended family members trapped in Rafah. All have been approved for visas from Canada.
My biggest fear right now is that I won't be able to talk to my sister tomorrow.
The problem? Canada can issue the visas, but the list of asylum seekers allowed to leave Gaza must be vetted by the Israelis.
The Israeli government has been quite clear in saying they are watching the actions of the Canadian government, and any actions that are seen as to be unfavorable can affect their decision-making at the highest political level. And so we can't be naive as a country as to the actions that we take and the impact that that can have on the ground and for actual people's lives.
Israel's ambassador had no comment on the matter, but Israel's policy has always been to do a background check and approve who gets to leave Gaza for its own security reasons, to ensure that, among other things, no one associated with Hamas is able to escape. Donna.
David in Ottawa, thanks. The federal opposition leader Pierre Poilievre is trying to topple the government by introducing a non-confidence motion. His Conservative Party doesn't have the numbers to pull that off, but that didn't stop him from trying. It's part of Poilievre's campaign to end the federal carbon tax.
So once again, which will it be? Will he spike the hike, or will we have a carbon tax election?
What will it be, Mr. Speaker? It will be that Canadians get more money with the Canada carbon rebate. 80% of Canadian households in areas where the federal carbon tax applies get more money every year from the Canada carbon rebate than they pay in the price on pollution.
The Conservative motion was defeated today after the Liberals, New Democrats and Bloc Québécois voted against it. The Environment Minister said the country can't put climate change on pause. The levy is set to rise about 23% on April 1st, which means consumers can expect to pay about 3 cents more for a litre of gas than they do now, though most Canadians will receive a rebate. There are new revelations about suspected fraud involving millions of taxpayer dollars. Public Services and Procurement Canada says it's referred the cases of 3 IT subcontractors to the RCMP. They're accused of fraudulently double billing millions of dollars in dozens of departments. Abigail Bimman explains what it's all about.
Nothing to do with the ArriveCan controversy, and different from the fired Auditor General employees whose cases were referred to police. Another procurement problem. 3 IT subcontractors accused of double billing dozens of departments for the same work for a total of $5 million.
The situation is obviously unacceptable.
This is a very serious issue, and it deserves a very serious response.
The government referred the cases to the RCMP, but federal officials call this just the first wave of fraudulent billing. They're looking into another 5 to 10 cases right now.
The $60 million Arrive scam is just the tip of the iceberg.
They need to name names. We don't know who has been implicated in this.
Citing the investigation, the government is being very vague on details, not naming the subcontractors or departments involved, with no clear answer on the extent of the problem. The Procurement Minister and Treasury Board President tried to put a positive spin on it.
It shows that the investments in what we call electronic procurement, in data gathering and data analytics over the last few years are starting to work really well.
Saying 98% of contracts are now digital, which allows for better communication between departments, and promising more oversight, including a new Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance and an updated manager's guide.
The purpose of that guide was and continues to be to reduce reliance on third-party contracting.
Ministers say the fact the 3 were found should be a warning to anyone else thinking of double billing the government. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
Global News has learned Canada's Immigration Tribunal has ordered the deportation of Iran's former Deputy Interior Minister. In December, a Global News investigation found Syed Salman Samani, once a spokesperson for Iran's security forces, was living in Toronto. The 43-year-old became a senior minister in Iran's government in 2016. He is the second senior member of the Iranian regime to face removal from Canada under sanctions which bar senior Iranian officials. Those sanctions were put in place after the killing of Mahsa Amini, whose death sparked mass protests in Iran. Soleimani's case is one of 9 suspected senior Iranian officials facing deportation proceedings in Canada. Toronto public health officials are warning about rising cases of Mpox, what we used to call monkeypox. There have been 21 confirmed cases in Toronto this year. Last year, there were just 27. The virus is usually spread through intimate contact, and men who have had sex with men are most affected. 2 doses of vaccine offers the best protection. In the U.S., a controversial immigration law in Texas has been put on hold again. Late last night, a federal appeals court voted to temporarily freeze the law that would allow local police to arrest, detain, and deport people suspected of crossing the border illegally from Mexico. Jackson Prosco now on the standoff playing out in Texas that could have international implications.
The international boundary between the U.S. and Mexico is at the center of the dispute between the state of Texas and the White House, after Texas passed its own immigration law, bypassing federal jurisdiction.
All Texas is going to be doing is basically enforcing the laws that were passed by Congress that Joe Biden is refusing to enforce.
The law, known as SB 4, gives local police and state judges the power to arrest and deport people suspected of illegally entering Texas from a foreign country, a job typically handled by U.S. Border Patrol. As the courts weigh whether SB 4 is constitutional, Mexico's president called it dehumanizing and said his country will not accept deportations from Texas if the law ultimately stands. Local police say they have concerns too.
It's not like, oh, he looks illegal and we're going to put him in jail. We can't do that. You know, we can't stereotype someone, someone from Mexico and do that.
Those who work on the front lines of immigration see an even bigger problem. The law could be used to target people already in the U.S.
It's not just against recently arriving migrants who are coming to the border today, but this really goes after Texans throughout the state.
It's all part of a broader fight between the White House and Republicans who have blocked bipartisan efforts at border reform in Congress. Iowa has now passed a bill similar to the one in Texas.
The states haven't been engaged in this kind of policy, no more than they have been in printing and coining currency. But if you let the states into this area, you open up a Pandora's box, and not just in immigration.
The standoff has become a major test of whether the states will remain united behind U.S. law. It seems unlikely to end the crisis at America's southern border, with migration still at record levels. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
In a move that surprised the country, Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar says he is resigning and that the country's coalition government would stand a better chance of re-election under another leader. Varadkar says the decision is both political and personal. He suffered 2 recent defeats in referendums on changing what he calls sexist language in the country's constitution. He was in Washington last week, where he challenged the U.S. position on the war on Hamas. He also played a leading role in the 2018 referendum that legalized abortion. He was the youngest person ever elected Irish Prime Minister when he took office, and the country's first biracial and openly gay Prime Minister. Tens of thousands of trees are being cut down in Vancouver's Stanley Park, coming up why so many of them are unhealthy or have already died. Plus, why all bodies of water in 2 national parks are now closed, and the investigation at the London hospital where Princess Kate was treated. Parks Canada is closing all bodies of water in 2 BC national parks and restricting watercraft in Alberta's Waterton Lakes National Park to slow the spread of some invasive species. Lakes, creeks and tributaries in eastern BC's Kootenay and Yoho National Parks will be closed until at least March of next year to try and contain something called whirling disease. It's infecting juvenile salmonid fish, including rainbow trout, steelhead and cutthroat trout. And beginning in April, non-motorized watercraft will be banned from entering Waterton Lakes National Park in southern Alberta to protect that waterway from whirling disease and also from invasive zebra and quagga mussels. Vancouver's Stanley Park is open for visitors, but they may be a bit surprised to see what's happening with the trees. The centuries-old forest has had a few bad years. An infestation of moths and a few scorching hot summers have killed thousands of trees, and others are dying. So about a third of the trees are being removed, changing the look of the park and leading to a bit of a backlash by some who love it. Neetu Garcha explains.
Stanley Park, a beloved gem of West Coast rainforest in the heart of Vancouver, is at the center of a contentious debate. The City of Vancouver is proposing a plan to remove dead trees from Stanley Park, citing concerns about wildfires and public safety.
These trees are going to come down regardless, whether it's through storm or just through natural processes.
We could lose our whole park to a fire. So cut the trees down that are dying to save the rest of the trees.
The Vancouver Park Board says drought and infestations by the western hemlock looper moth have devastated a significant portion of the park's tree cover.
The Park Board says the plan to remove about 160,000 of these dead trees aims to enhance the forest's health, prevent injuries, and mitigate the risk of wildfires.
Everybody's heartbroken that we have to do this work in Stanley Park, but it is necessary.
But not everyone is convinced. Critics say they're skeptical about the extent of the tree removal.
So I became quite alarmed at the dramatic change that would cause to Stanley Park and to my experience and to other people's experience.
Michael Robert Cadet started a petition to halt the tree cutting. It's received more than 16,000 signatures. He says based on his own research and discussions with experts, he doesn't believe there's an imminent fire danger.
Their case was very weak that if there were a danger, the proper solution would be to cut down a third of the forest.
Meanwhile, across the Rockies in Alberta, similar work has taken place. Last winter, crews began thinning approximately 34 hectares of forest in and around Banff National Park. The decision, driven by concerns over climate change and the mountain pine beetle infestation, also aims to reduce the risk of wildfires.
The misconception is that we're cutting down trees unnecessarily, and that is absolutely not the case. They're cutting down dead trees.
As the dispute over forest management underscores the delicate balance between preservation and protection. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
How happy are you? Ahead, where Canada ranks on the World Happiness Index. At least 8 people are dead after a South Korean tanker capsized off the coast of southwestern Japan. At around 7 a.m. local time, Japan's Coast Guard received a call the ship was tilting in rough weather. It had capsized by the time rescuers arrived. 11 passengers from South Korea, Indonesia, and China were on board. Only one of the 9 people who was rescued ended up surviving. 2 others are still missing. A British privacy watchdog is investigating claims staff at a private London hospital attempted to access Princess Kate's medical records. The Daily Mirror newspaper reports at least one staff member at the London clinic was trying to obtain the medical records of Kate, Princess of Wales. She spent almost 2 weeks at the clinic after abdominal surgery in January. There are strict rules about which patient notes staff can access, and intentionally breaching them could be a criminal offence. The UK's Information Commissioner says it's received a report and is assessing the information. An internal investigation is also underway at the hospital, which also recently treated King Charles. This year's World Happiness Report is out, and Finland has done it again. The annual report ranks global happiness in 143 countries, taking into account 6 factors such as social support, income, and health. And for a 7th year, Finland is in the top spot. Nordic countries lead the list. Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, and Norway all made the top 10. The U.S. didn't make the top 20, the first time it's ranked this poorly since the report began in 2012. And Canada, it was ranked 15th overall. Next, Canadians pay their respects to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney before he leaves Ottawa for the last time. Hundreds of Canadians stood in line in Ottawa today for their turn to pay their respects to the late Brian Mulroney. Today would have been the former Prime Minister's 85th birthday. The hearse carrying his casket passed by Parliament Hill for one final time before heading to Montreal ahead of the state funeral on Saturday. Mackenzie Gray spoke to some of the people who waited in the bitter cold in Ottawa today to remember the man they hold dear in their hearts.
Early morning tears gave way to smiles as Brian Mulroney's family received warm tributes from Canadians for a second day as the former Prime Minister lay in state in Ottawa.
We lost a Prime Minister, but they lost a dad, and she lost a husband.
Today is about filling that space with the memories of everyday Canadians who are waiting outside right now. I can see the line out there. And to listen to them and to enjoy their memories and their kind words.
The family was so nice and sweet. I felt like I was meeting the royal family, so it was really cool.
It was an amazing moment, very intimate. They were great with the people, very personable. It felt like a family funeral.
Those intimate moments ultimately exceeded over schedule to accommodate all those who came to pay their respects before a final private family moment together with Mulroney's casket. Canada's 18th Prime Minister now headed to Montreal, where he'll lie in repose for 2 days ahead of his state funeral Saturday. These are, of course, grand displays not often seen in Canadian life. Their significance acknowledged today by son Marc. From our entire family, thank you again to everybody out there who's reached out or wrote to us. We can't thank you enough, he shared. Indeed, March 20th has been a long, memorable day for the Mulroney family. This year, they mark it in grief and quiet celebration, without the husband and father who led this country. Dad would have been 85 today, Marc wrote. What a life he had. We miss him dearly. Mackenzie Gray, Global News, Ottawa.
I'll host live coverage of Brian Mulroney's state funeral in Montreal Saturday morning, right here on Global. That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Spring has officially sprung, and sorry to those who are still feeling like they're living in the depths of winter. Tonight's Your Canada. Are these beautiful cherry blossoms in Vancouver? Yeah, I said sorry. Thanks for watching. Jackson Prosco will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you again on Friday. Bye-bye.